Hi, and welcome to an episode of Engineering Our Future podcast. I am Nicolai Oliden here with Luis, and we're excited to be discussing salary negotiations today. Luis, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited about this conversation, and I am 100% sure you know a lot more than me on this. I think I have only gone through like one salary negotiation. In fact, I asked you for a lot of feedback, so I'm excited to have this conversation. I know it's going to be very valuable for a lot of people.
Sure. No, I hopefully have a little more experience because of the years, but unfortunately, most of my experience is things that I've done wrong and I've learned from. And hopefully, we'll be able to help those listeners avoid some of those mistakes and embarrassments, if we want to say that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be fun. Salary is always kind of a difficult thing to talk about. Sometimes it can be uncomfortable to talk about with some coworkers, and so sometimes reaching out for outside help is good. Now here we are in September when we're recording this, and your company may do annual increases or salary increases in October. Maybe they do it in December, or maybe they do it in May. So I think step one would be figuring out when does your company do this annual increase. Maybe it's coinciding with their fiscal year, or maybe they just do end of year raises. I don't know. You have to figure it out. Every company I've worked for has done it a little bit different. Um, but for my company, I just had my annual review because our fiscal year starts in October. So we did the annual review, and then in the next couple months, we'll start to discuss salary stuff. And I want to say, I don't know how many managers we have listening here, but I just wanted to make sure I said this sometime in the episode. It would be so great if the managers listening to this do their own review of their team, and you are ready. You see maybe who's ready to get an increase. Maybe you see who's outperforming, and just have all that data ready before your team members even come to you. I will say this year I have had the opportunity to promote an employee, to give an increase to an employee that maybe needed to be brought up closer to their peers. And that goes such a long ways when we take a proactive approach as managers, and just get our employees to where they need to be before they even ask. I promise you it will go a long way with your team. So just wanted to make sure I threw that out there if any managers are actually listening to today's episode. But I guess I can start with one of the ways I did it wrong, when I was younger. I would say I probably was at like a 7 years experience point in my career, and I just had a personal goal of making $80,000 by the time I turned 30. It was just kind of on my achievement list that I wanted to do. And so when my employer at the time gave me an increase, and it was like 78,500 or something along that range, it was great. I mean, that's what the position was paying at the time, and I accepted it. And then I went back to them about a week later and just said, I think I should be getting $80,000. And they said, okay, well, what backup do you have? Why do you want to do this? What value do you use to justify all of this? And I just looked at them blank, blank minded, and I'm just like, okay. And that was it. It was a hard no. But I didn't come prepared. I had no justification. Um, that was a little embarrassing, just to do that. And so going for a salary increase just because you want it is really not appropriate, not really the right way to do it. But I guess that brings it to, what value are you bringing to the company, and what value are you bringing to those projects? Are you serving your team well? Are you making your supervisor, manager, project manager's life easier? Do they feel the value that you bring, or is it just in your own head that you're like, oh, I do a good job, and they're just thinking, oh, you do the bare minimum, right?
Mhm.
So you really need to dive down into what value are you bringing the company. And I think it's Jim Rohn that said, you don't get paid by the hour, you get paid for the value you bring to that hour. And when I really kind of internalized that and thought about that and applied that to like how I think about salary increases, it's awesome. It changes the way you work, and it really helps me focus on that value that I bring. Well, what about you? I know that you have asked for a salary increase before. How did it go? What were the awkwardnesses of it? Like, what was the experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first time is just, I mean, you're sitting in a position where I don't know about you, but I'm sure most engineers are kind of afraid for us to ask for more salary, or ask or negotiate a contract, for example, for a project, or um, I don't know. I can think of a lot of examples, but the earlier you start practicing the skills, and I think we talked about this in the annual reviews part of this kind of mini series we're doing, it's going to be easier to come back and actually do those things. So I took my time. I At our company would do the annual reviews, and then these salary raises come like after that. You get either an email or a call, and you can just basically say, hey, we think this is where you are. At the time, I didn't quite agree because I was doing research. I mean, I like to look around what salaries are doing, what the industry is doing, and I didn't quite agree. So I did more research. I talked to a few people. I asked around. I know it's taboo to ask what other people make, but I was had really close friends that were really open to me, and I appreciated that, and kind of gave me an idea. And they were obviously not in the area, but kind of through the US, and seeing what other people were making inside of the company. There's a lot of different factors. ASCE has a great survey that I basically based all of these off. So that was kind of my main resource, just looking through that survey and seeing, hey, what about people with 4 years of experience, have a PE, live in the Denver area, have a master's? You can narrow it down pretty good, and then it gives you a range, or like a median and a percentile up and down on kind of the average salaries in the area. So that's what I use. And I wouldn't necessarily think it was a um negotiation. I wasn't like when you think of negotiation, where you kind of start practicing and doing all these tactics to negotiate with the other person. It was more of a conversation, which makes it a lot easier. Like I say, okay, here's what you guys said I should be making. Here's what I'm looking at, and here's what I think. This is the range I think I should be making. Let's have a conversation about it. And that made it a lot easier. I don't think I've ever really been in a situation where I'm like actually negotiating and like staring the poker face. Hey, if you don't give me this, I'm leaving. Like there's never really something like that that I've gone through, and I'm very grateful because I will suck at that. I don't know what kind of experiences you've had, but mine was more like a conversation, I will say, and obviously we can talk about the annual review and all of that. That brings the feedback and brings the backup to the salary that you're asking for. So if you were not a good performer, if you were not doing great at the company, that increase is probably not going to make sense. Even if other people have that salary range, if you are not performing, it's going to be really hard for you to really get that range. What about you? Like, I want to hear your stories and what you have gone through, because I'm sure they're very very different than what my experience was.
Yeah, well, I think one thing you hit something about the negotiation versus a conversation, and when you hear when I at least when I hear the term negotiation, I kind of get a little freaked out by it. I get a little overwhelmed and scared, and I don't like it. I don't like conflict. It's just in my nature. I like harmony. I like when things are going well, people are happy. It really just like gets to me if people are unhappy, and I've never had it be kind of a contest or like we're arguing. It really was just a negotiation. I presented facts, and the more prepared I was, the easier it was because they really just were able to look at it and give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. um, I think timing is a good issue as well. You let's say you just got a end of year increase, kind of like a cost of living increase, which honestly we all kind of assume that we deserve and need a cost of living increase, but there's nothing that requires a company to give you a cost of living increase. So that's another good thing to keep in mind. But let's say you get like a 3% raise, and it starts in January. I wouldn't necessarily go in February and start asking for a raise. Like, let's do this before maybe right after the annual review and you get your satisfactory or your outperforming, you know, rating. Again, if you are just meeting expectations satisfactory the whole time, I mean, cost of living increase is probably going to be your limit until you start to maybe get passed by peers, and then maybe there needs to be some sort of equity increase there. But otherwise, if you're only just getting middle of the road ratings, it's going to be a little harder for you to justify asking for that raise because we're talking about that value that you're bringing. So timing is a good one. Maybe 6 months after getting a cost of living increase could be a good one because now you have time to justify what you are proposing to ask for. And then another one is I see this a lot, and I even think I did this before. I was asking for a raise of a job that I wanted, not a job that I was already doing. You know, it's like, hey, I am performing, or I think I'm performing, or I'm trying to become this project engineer. I didn't have that title yet. I didn't, really have those duties yet. Maybe on a project or two, I was performing at that level, but it wasn't really my full job yet. And so asking for a salary in that range wasn't really appropriate because I wasn't giving that value already. And I see a lot of people that do one task or one project that is a little beyond their current skill set, and they think automatically, oh, I should be making what that person's making. So again, be realistic. Do a lot of salary research data. Peers and other mentors are really great resources for help. The salary survey that you mentioned with ASCE is good. I promise you, your company is probably getting salary surveys, and seeing what's happening around their area. It's fun for me now as a kind of a more regional person. I have 4 different states, and so the salaries in those 4 different states are even a little different. So like a PE in one state might be making 4,000 more than another just because the cost of living in that state is different. It's fair because that is a really great salary for Nevada versus Utah versus New Mexico, right? But yeah, that's just it's a whole different ball game for me to have to think about other states and kind of their costs of livings there as well. But when you're researching data, look at what position are you performing at. One other
Yeah.
thing I want to talk about on the research data is you might see you're not just necessarily asking for a salary increase, but you need a promotion that will come with a salary increase. I've had people on my team where I wanted to give them a raise, but when I look at kind of the position they were in, and kind of we'll just call it like the column, the band, whatever you want to say, that they're in, they're doing those duties, really well, and they're outperforming time and time again. And I can't justify a raise because now they're going to be making 30,000. I'm just throwing a number, but they're making a huge percentage more than everybody else in that category. And so really it wasn't just a raise we're looking at. It was, hey, you are performing in that next level. You are meeting all of these other, key performance indicators. And so we need to move you to the next or title, and now we can give you a salary increase to match that. One of my employees recently, just about a month ago, wanted to have a one-on-one with me and wanted to specifically talk about career advancement. And we have one-on-ones every month anyways, but this one was really focused on, okay, what is my next 3 to 5 year goal? And he printed out basically KPIs for the next position and was saying, okay, I've done this one, I've done this one, I'm doing this one, I'm working towards this one. And we basically went step by step, and he's not doing all of them yet. So there's no justification. And he knew that he was not doing all of them yet. But his goal was, I am going to make sure I'm checking all these boxes. And when I do, I hope that you see that and we can start talking about a promotion. I loved it. It was awesome. That guy is going to be doing very well in his career, very focused. And if you don't know how to get those, key performance indicators for your next level, have a conversation with your boss at your review. Go ask him and just say, hey, I want to advance my career. I want to go to the next step at this company. I don't really know what that next step is. So can you give me any sort of indicators on what do I need to be doing and performing at what level to justify that promotion? Because that's what I want to shoot for. I promise you, your boss will be very impressed with that.
Something we have and we started doing recently is having job descriptions. I don't know if they're like public when we like open a position or anything, but kind of internally of knowing, okay, here's what project managers do, here's what technical leads do, here's what project engineers do, and just gives you kind of what you're saying. Just hey, here are the things that I need to hit to become a technical lead. Here's the things I need to hit to become a project manager, and makes it super clear. You're not guessing, hey, am I there, am I not? Like the conversation becomes almost black and white, because you come to these meetings and say, hey, am I hitting these things? Some of the things are a little subjective, and that's fine. Some of them are harder to really give a number to, but at least you get a sense of, hey, this is what I really need to be doing, this is what I need to be to hit that. And I think that's a great example, kind of your employee just coming and having a list. And even if there is not a list at your company, you could create one. Hey, I see that the technical leads have are doing these kind of things. They manage projects, they work with people, they are, and you can create a list and say, hey, this is what I think I need to be doing. Can you help me fill it up and complete this list? Because I really want to be there, but if I know what I need to do to get there, it's going to be really hard for me to get there. And I think, again, going back to, I think we did an episode on reviews and feedback and everything, but getting that feedback frequently and accepting the feedback and really understanding that hopefully they have good intentions for you, and
Yeah.
hopefully the feedback is positive, but in a way that helps you improve in what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I Getting that feedback is key. Hopefully you can go find that annual review conversation that we had and listen to that episode as well. So I guess that kind of leads us to the next kind of thing to do to prepare for these negotiations are reflecting on your achievements, gathering all of the things that you've done, throughout the year that you can use to justify and not just say I want something because I want it. It's I want this because these are the things that I have done to prove that I'm ready for this increase
I want to
or to
touch on
prove that this is
something.
the value that I'm bringing.
Yeah, I want to touch on something before we move there. And you're
Yeah.
talking about the cost of living increase 3%. It may not seem like a lot right now, but if you're getting those every single year, pretty constantly, that is that is great. If you start adding up 3%, 3%, if you look at 30, 40 years of your career, how much money that is versus if you're not getting
Yeah.
that every year. And obviously like a single increase of 5, 10,000, it's going to make a big impact in that number. But think about of the long term. I'm sure you have done the calculation, like what a 5% raise right now does to your salary in 20, 30
Yeah,
years. Like
I normally have that number in my head, yes.
exactly. So I mean, just think about that. Like we often think, like, hey, 3% of the salary right now. Let's say you make 100,000. It's only what, $3,000.
3,000. Yeah.
Doesn't seem like a lot when you think about it. But if you map it out to 30, 40 years and you start compounding that, and if you're smart about your investments, and we can go on a rabbit hole on that, but just thinking about really brings it into perspective. And I think it reduces your, I don't know, fear of you're making maybe less than other people right now. um it's more than just that number right now. Again, the compensation comes with that as well. We're talking about salary here, but compensation, how many PTO days are you getting? And again, you can start balancing
Right.
that percentage and analyzing what really makes sense for you and your current situation.
That is actually a really good point to make sure we pause on is the total compensation because, when you're asking maybe friends at other companies what they're making, and if they're, two to $3,000 more than you on average, it's not because your employer is paying you too little. It might be you have better benefits. So definitely make sure that uh, you keep that in mind, the total compensation in mind for sure. That's a really good one that we needed to make sure we said. So
Yeah.
thank you for that.
And when I was doing my research, there was someone that actually made like, I think it was 10, 15,000 more than I was making, but they didn't get quarterly profit sharing. And that is a big
Mm,
chunk of, I mean, it's 10% of my compensation a year. So it makes a big difference. So yeah, talking about that, not just asking, hey, well, how much do you make a year? And that's it. Like looking at the other things that provide value, like insurance. And we made an episode on that. So I'll make sure I link that when we post this episode.
yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff that goes behind that. And yeah, for sure. The number can look a lot different, but when you look at the total compensation, calculating that and on a I think on a dollar value at the end, maybe a little complicated, but it's a good way to like compare the salary between companies and between
Yeah.
people.
I have recommended it for people in the past, and it is a really difficult because you really have to be careful of who you talk to. But I've recommended people in the past get like a really good circle of friends, people that aren't going to be competitive with each other, that aren't going to be jealous of one another. Which that's the hard part, is how do you find somebody who will openly talk about their salary and not then hate you, or you hate them, or whatever. It's you have to be careful. But I had a group of about 5 people that every couple years we did like an anonymous survey, and we would throw it and say, okay, tell us what your salary is, tell us what your benefits are, tell us what your 401k match, and all these other factors to kind of get a total compensation comparison. And these were all people that were all at the same level. And then we would be able to look, and some years I was on the high side, which didn't happen much, but most of the time I was on the low side. But then I would see that my company gave some really strong benefits, and I was like, hey, I make 5-10,000 less than them, but maybe I'm taking home more because of all these other benefits. So if you can find a group of people that will grow in your career with you, and you're kind of like parallel with them a lot. I actually we haven't done it in a few years, but one of the guys in this group, I just had lunch with him on Monday, and we had a very open conversation about compensation. And we both felt really good, like, hey, I think we are both being more than fairly compensated. And we felt good, and it was just nice to be able to bounce that off with somebody that wasn't necessarily at my company. So I'll throw that recommendation out here, but I just, with the caveat of, be very careful who you invite into that
Mhm.
conversation.
Some one last thing I'm gonna add there, because we were talking about that with the position. We all know that we have billing rates. I don't think a lot of people realize the ratio or the percentage between the billing rates and the hourly rate, and I think that's a good percentage to keep in mind. I learned this from a previous company. They were really open about these, and I really appreciate it because it helps me kind of understand the business behind what we do for engineering. We have a billing rate that we bill clients. We bill whenever we do any work, but that's not the amount of money we get in our pocket. It would be nice if it was, because usually it's high. I don't know. I don't know exactly what the industry standard is, but I think it's somewhere between 30 and 40%. It's gonna be some overhead um, to cover expenses and all of that. But if you start creeping up above that percentage in your position, that's when you start looking at that promotion to really bump up that um, hourly rate that you're getting paid. So there's a lot of different factors that you can look at, and that's kind of one of the first things I actually did, because with the PE you get a billing rate increase, so the percentages were obviously were not where I thought they were going to be, and I think that's also a great way to come prepared to the meeting and come prepared to having that conversation. Hey, I was making this much money when I had this billing rate. My billing rate increased, but my salary didn't really increase. Like, what's going on? Am I still working towards kind of that position? Because there's obviously some training and some inefficiencies when you start transitioning. But at the same time, if you're increasing that billing rate, there's a little bit of negotiation there that can happen. So I wanted to make sure that I point that out,
No,
because not a
that's
lot of people really understand that, and I think that's a very important point to understand.
it's a really good way just to kind of get a quick pulse on where you stand. So that's a good one as well. All right, so back to kind of reflecting on the achievements and gathering all this data to justify and prove what you're doing. I keep a folder on my inbox, and anytime I get a praise or feedback, or maybe a client wrote a letter saying this about me or whatever. I kind of log it into this folder. And so at the end of the year, when I'm preparing for my annual review specifically, because I want to be able to showcase these achievements in that annual review, before I discuss salary. Um, that helps me because it's hard to remember what you do throughout the year, right? And so I found that to be helpful. I just anytime you ask for feedback and somebody gives you it, just log it somewhere and just be ready to do that. Maybe you finish a project that had a $400,000 budget and your team, because obviously you didn't do it yourself, but your team, delivered it and there was, $50,000 profit in there, you know, write that down and send yourself an email saying at the end of this project, we made $50,000 for the company, or we hit the deadline for this project. Just find some way to kind of archive all the data for the year, and then be able to share that, because anything that's impacting schedule, scope, budget, financial for the company, you want to make sure that you are highlighting the positives there. And then when you finally get to a dollar value, okay, so you've done your research, you've gathered the data on yourself, you have a really good, honest, value range that you feel like you're providing. You want to have a dollar number. So let's say you really kind of come up with like 88,000 or 90,000. I think my position right now with what I'm doing, not my years of experience. I think that's something you want to be ready to say, but if you are outperforming, I know some 5-year experienced people that are operating like a 7 or 8 year person. And I know some 5-year people that are operating like a 2-year person. Okay. So I would maybe focus on the value, focus on the achievements, focus on those KPIs, instead of necessarily just the years of experience. So you're going to take that dollar range, and 90,000 is this value that I'm bringing to the company, and have that number in mind. The way that I have approached it, I don't know if it's the best way or not, but I come with a range. So if 90,000 is what I really really want, I normally have a dollar value of like 87,000, where for me that's acceptable. You know, like I will still be happy with 87. If it's 85, I'm really not going to be that happy. I won't feel like it was done. I didn't really get what I wanted. But 90 is the goal, 87 is acceptable, 85 is kind of where I'm not too happy. So then I'll have a range of 85 to 92 or something like that. But then I will just tell them, like, I want to tell them a dollar that I want, 90,000. Some people will say, don't give them a dollar value, give them a range and see what they come back with. Let them be the first one to negotiate. And I think all the negotiation tactics probably point you that way. Let them be the first one to say a number, and then argue your number. But I've always found it, again, my personal experience, I've just gone in, said this is what I'm hoping for. um it's been positive. Sometimes they hit it, sometimes they don't, sometimes they get to that acceptable number. But I that's why I kind of have that range in my head anyways. As long as I get that acceptable number, I'm still leaving it with a positive, you know um just emotion there. So
Yeah, I
what
tend to,
about
I was,
any questions on that?
I was gonna say I tend to prefer the range. With the I can go either way. In the past, I've done the range just because it's easier, and you're not like forcing the hand of someone else. Like, hey, this is my number. If they don't hit that number, then I'm gonna walk. I feel like that's kind of most of what people are thinking. But with the range, again, I'm going in. Hey, I'm this is the range I'm gonna give them. I usually give them, I don't know, $5,000 range, and I'm somewhere in between where it's kind of my sweet spot. Like, hey, if I get more than this, great, because I think I deserve more than that. But I understand the situation when I was doing this, and I think that there was a lot of flexibility and all of that. So I understand that, but I came with the range in mind. Again, here's my minimum. If I don't get this minimum, then really something needs to happen, because I'm not gonna be happy. But usually employers are reasonable. I mean, they're not strangers to these type of conversations, to this type of salary among all the employees within the company. If you're a great performer, you have obviously a lot of leverage, and they're not gonna let you go for $2,000. So I'm sure you probably have been in those situations where maybe you wish to get a little more, but you're happy with that salary that you were getting at the time, and sometimes that's okay. I think people sometimes get a little greedy with these negotiations, and they want to really kick it out of the park every single time, but they don't look at the big picture. Like for me, like working from home, how much that brings value to my salary every year. Being able to go have lunch with my kids every day for 30-40 minutes, and I don't have to be worrying about commuting, or um, if I have a doctor's appointment, I can just go and come back and keep working. Like how much money does that add to my salary? Like I don't know. There is no amount of money I can put to that.
Yeah.
So we need to see at all of that stuff. And I think the total compensation episode goes well with this one into, hey, there is more than just the salary number. Um, Especially when you come to these conversations, you need to be clear on those things, because I'm sure the your supervisor, the people you're talking to, the HR, has that in mind. Like, hey, I'm giving you all this flexibility, I'm giving you all this freedom, you're a great performer, we want to make sure we are compensating you well, but at the same time these other things have some monetary value at the end of the day, and I think we need to be a little flexible. I don't know what your opinion is in that, but I feel
No,
like sometimes
I
people
think
get
that's a
greedy.
great point. That's a really good point because I have a friend, and uh I want everybody to be treated fairly. I want everybody to be paid fairly. You know, if you're performing well, like let's pay you well. um but and it's not a greed thing, like you said. There are people who have that mentality, and I'll explain that example here in a minute. But I am never approaching it personally as a greed thing. It's just, this is what I think I'm doing, and I want to be treated fairly. But so I had this friend, and it was clearly kind of in that greed category, you know. And he was in a different industry, so you know, he their salary ranges were a little different, and he could grow quickly, and so he was making like 60 grand. And 8 months later, he says, hey, I want to be making 80,000. But his company said that's not what it pays, so he says, all right, I'm leaving. So he left and followed money. And 6 months after that, he's like, oh man, I hate this company. So I'm going to go leave somewhere else. And they gave him another $20,000 bump. Again, this is like software industry. So it's crazy. I don't even know how they justify this half the time. So they're giving him another $20,000 or something like that. And in the course of 5 years, he changed four different companies, and he increased his salary by about $110,000, which is insane. Again, makes no sense at all. But he was never happy. And even when he finally got to this where he thought it was like a dream job, 3 months after he started, he was already thinking, oh man, what's the next thing to do? And it was just driving me nuts. I couldn't even talk to him about it anymore because I thought, you're chasing the money. It's great that you're getting it. You know, I mean, yeah, if you're smart, you can bank it and help your family out. But like there's a happiness factor here, there's a contentment and a fulfillment factor here. And you know, I love what I do. And you know, I just started a new company last year. You know, they're paying me very fairly. If I only get a 3% or whatever the cost of living increases this year, I'm probably going to be very happy because I'm making more than I need to make. You know, my family is safe, we're secure, we're saving for retirement. I mean, sure, it would be great to make more money, but like that's not really my focus at the moment. My focus is, how can I advance my career? How can I do this? You know, there's some, maybe a position that I want to get myself positioned for. And really at this point in my career, extra money is not going to make me more happy. It's it's that advancement that really is going to be driving me. Now, I know that will come with money eventually, but again, it's just, you get to a point where it's not even the main focus, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so anyways, I think the last point, we want to make sure we don't want to have like a whole hour episode on this, but I think the last point here is, okay, you've done your research, you've made your justifications, you've almost like prepared a presentation. Now, you don't necessarily have to do a presentation, but you've gathered the materials. Get it on the schedule. Don't wait for your boss to come to you and do it. Now, I did start this episode by telling the managers here, be proactive yourself and do it yourself, because that's going to go a long ways. But let's say your manager is not listening and they did not get that uh, tip from them. Get it on the schedule. Now I have a one-on-one every single month at a minimum with all of my employees. And there have been a couple times where people just said, "Could you just look at, is my compensation fair?" And most of them have said, "Yeah, you're doing very well. When we look at all of the industry, you should be very happy with where you are." And they're normally fine with that. But there has been one where it was clearly time for a salary increase because they were outperforming consistently. And so this person reached out to me and said, "I would like to have a salary discussion with you, like just straight to the point. I want to do this." I said, "Sure, let's get it on the calendar." And they pretty much came with all of the reasons that we've discussed this episode. They just did it all right, and it was a great conversation, great opportunity for them. They got it. It was about middle of the year, and they were able to get it. But yeah, I mean, get it on the calendar. Don't just wait. Be proactive because you have your best interests for your career. I hope your manager mirrors that. But I also know that it's very easy for us managers to get busy and overwhelmed and burdened with other things. And so if they are not doing it, make sure you'd be the one to take the reins and get it on the schedule.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I mean, you are in control of your career. Like your manager, they may have the best interests, but sometimes, I mean, how many people are you managing right now? Five, seven, maybe more?
Me?
Yeah,
Oh, I have 25.
exactly. It's like it's impossible to keep track of every single one, especially larger companies. So you need to be the strongest advocate for your own career. And even if it's a bump to imagine, hey, we haven't talked about this in a while. Like, should we? Do you want to talk about this in the next one-on-one? Like, it's that simple. Have an agenda for every one-on-one. Like, come prepared to those meetings and make sure you're looking at your own goals. Like, it's too easy for us to for engineers to, hey, set the goals at the beginning of the year and kind of forget about them and hope the manager remembers throughout the year and they're keeping track of everything. But managing 25 people is not like that's your only job. You have 100 other things that you have to keep track of on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So as engineers, we need to, especially if you're starting out, you need to keep tracking of your goals and have them written down in front of you, a sticky note or whatever, and make sure you're checking in frequently. I mean, our company doesn't really have quarterly or monthly check-ins. They're starting to do like a mid-year check-in, which I think is great. But I even in conversations, hey, it's been a while since we talk about this. How are we doing? Here are some of the things that I know we're working on. Like, hey, is there anything I can do better? Is there anything I can change? You're in charge of your career. I think at the end of the day, that's kind of the main point to drive home.
Yeah. I guess one last thing we should say is, let's say you don't get it. You know, how are you going to handle the rejection? If you feel that if you were like me and you just said, because I wanted,
Mhm.
you know, hopefully you're not going to get your feelings too hurt because you really did not prepare. I did not prepare. I deserved a no in that request. Um, but let's say you really are outperforming. You have all the metrics that you can share. You have all these things that you can point to say, like, this is the value that I'm bringing. And they still say no because they totally can. Uh, just be ready with what you're going to do. I really advocate for I hope nobody just goes, gets another offer, and then threatens the current company to say, if you don't match this offer, I'm out of here. For me, that is the cringiest thing. And honestly, I probably will not, even try to keep you. I have worked with companies that was their policy. They will not even try to keep you if you do that. And then I know other companies that are so desperate that they're like, hey, here's an extra 10,000 bucks. They'll just do it.
Yeah, and just in that position, like I feel like even if your company were to say yes to that, I think it just tells you how little they really value you. Because if they're not really giving you that in the first place because they value you, and you have to go outside and find that, I think there's gonna be a lot more friction ahead of you. And if again saying no for them is fine, but I think you need to be ready to either understand that, hey, maybe I just need to work a little harder. Maybe I need to be more strategic about the things I need to do to get to that value. Or
Yeah.
maybe the situation is, hey, I've tried everything I can. I don't think this raise is gonna come. I'm just gonna go find someone else. And I think that's fine too. Like you're not attached to one company. You need to do what's best for your career, but you need
Yeah.
to have the mindset and be prepared to come to these meetings and show your value, show that. And I think you as an employee need to do your best to show how much value you bring to the company.
Yeah.
The decision on the other hand, if they say no, then maybe that company is not for you at the end of the day. And I think that's okay too. I think we need to come prepared to say, hey, they're gonna say no. Maybe I love this company. There is nothing wrong with the company. They're gonna say no. Okay, that's fine. Let's work towards that. Let's have that conversation in the future and make sure we get there. If you're not too
Yeah.
happy with the company, maybe that's the last what do you even call that? I
The
don't
last
know.
straw.
Yeah, and then just
Yeah.
you're out of there. But I think you need to be prepared before that decision comes to you.
If you love the company, which again, the grass is not always greener. I have another friend who made a jump recently, and I think it was a
You have a lot of
pretty
friends.
rude awakening that was like,
Great
oh my
examples.
gosh, what did I do? Like I think he might have been chasing a title, he might have been chasing a promotion, and he got it. Great for him, but it so it was a wide awakening for him to see, ooh, what did I get myself into?
Mhm.
But if they say no, and you love the company, don't leave that room without saying, okay, you're saying no now. What do I need to do? What markers do I need to hit to get that yes? Again, if I had an employee do that, they already start to kind of gain a little bit of a positive in my mindset here. And now I'm going to start watching them and watching them a little more closely, because if they're accepting the no, but then saying, okay, let's do this, let's see what we can do to get it, that's a go-getter, and that is hard to find.
Mhm.
And so I definitely would pay a little more attention to that person if they did it, instead of just walking out of the room with their head down and then they're thinking that they want to leave. Um so yeah, just be ready for the no, and then if you do get the yes, please say thank you. I mean, seriously,
Yes,
don't just be like, yeah, I
I
deserve that.
deserve that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you did deserve it, but like, please just share some acknowledgement or gratitude, because they didn't have to do it. And so I'm not saying like write a letter or anything, but just a simple thank you. It does go a long ways, and not just turning around and be like, all right, finally they gave it to me. So I don't know, just tips on wrapping it up.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I salary is a big deal, and you really should be um, taking care of yourself. My first 6 years of my career, I just kind of sat there and let the salary increase how they wanted it. I never really talked about it. I didn't take a proactive approach. And 6 years later, I was drastically below
Mhm.
my peers, and the company that I did, they just weren't. I don't want to say they weren't watching out for me. They were providing me opportunities. They were doing all this other stuff. They just had the mentality of, if I'm not going to talk to them about money, then why do they need to talk to me about money?
Yeah.
And so that was an eye opener for me. And I again, I caught up. I'm doing great, after that. But those first 6 years, I was like tens of thousands of dollars below my peers,
Mhm.
and that wasn't fun to realize. So be proactive, even if you're uncomfortable with it, because trust me, I hated it. I so am uncomfortable sometimes with salary negotiations, especially early on. But go in there, and I think it's going to go well for them. So
Yeah. Looking at the ASC survey, I think is a great way to stay up to date every year. I think as ASC members, we get 5 kind of runs through it every year. I know you have a survey. I don't know if it's still public or not, but maybe you should work
yeah,
on
we
on
should
that.
we should make it more public.
Yeah.
I in a couple years ago, I started a survey, so the information's outdated at the moment.
Mhm.
But you know what? Let's get that back up and going, and shared, and it was a bigger focus on total compensation.
Yeah.
That way, you weren't just looking at salary numbers. It really gave people a good understanding of the total package.
Mhm.
So that's why I really liked my survey a lot, whereas some of the other surveys didn't go that in depth. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll get a link out on this podcast page for that survey.
Yeah, hopefully we get more input because again, it's totally anonymous. I don't think you have to send your email name or anything, but you get the benefits of getting all that data once you complete the survey. So very
Yeah,
exciting. I'll probably do it myself too because I want to I want to see some of that information too. It's been a couple of years since I really looked at salaries, because that was my kind of last annual review when I asked for a salary. So
Okay.
I'm going to be doing it.
Nice. Well, thanks for letting me talk about this topic. It's very important, and I hope the people here do take that proactive approach. And as we approach the end of this year.
Absolutely. It was great talking to you, and we'll talk to you all later. If you really enjoyed this episode of the Junior Future Podcast, you're going to love the content we have over our website at luisfelipeduque.com. You can find the link in the description of this episode, as well as the show notes at luisfelipeduque.com/podcast. Every episode comes packed with a lot of links, a lot of information. So you can find all the show notes and all the information related to this episode over at luisfelipeduque.com/podcast. Thank you so much for coming back to this episode. Thank you, Jack Winters, for the music. And as always, let's continue engineering our future.